So you have the copy-paste file I'm using. I've done this before because my typing is so terrible. I rarely try to actually type everything from scratch. So I typically use these what I call copy-paste files, and we'll kind of walk through the whole application development that way. But we're going to use the Sport Motors database. So I opened up SQL Server. I ran the script to just get the database up and going. Just thought I'd point out, in case you hadn't noticed before, right at the top there's a little, I shouldn't say status bar, but it shows you the database, the server, the database, and so on that we're working with there, right? Now we're just going to focus on two of the tables, okay? Sport customer and the sport state, okay? It's a one-to-many relationship. By the way, I know you have the PNG file of the whole database system. I shared this with a couple students, and I'm not sure if I shared it with everybody, how you can make your own database diagram. So I just right-click on the database diagrams, say yes, I want to add support, and I've always just shown selecting everything, but you don't have to. If I know I'm just focused on customer and the sport state, I only have to add those two. I don't have to add them all, right? And then I can just see the simple relationship I'm actually working with today. Anyway, that's kind of a side point. So this is up and running. I'm just going to, actually I even close it. I don't need it open, okay, in order to work with the database. Nah, I don't even want to save that. Okay. So now we're going to go in and we're going to create an actual application. So I've started a new project. I just typed blank up here. So it's blank app universal windows. That's what we're going to use for our demo today. I'll just click next. I'm going to call it sport demo, I guess. Now in terms of where you put it, I sometimes have issues with anything on OneDrive. So my preferred approach, I know it's a little dangerous in the sense that if I were to lose power, okay, my code isn't backed up anywhere automatically here, but I'm going to go in and make a new folder, just call it my work, right off the root of the C drive, and that's where I'm going to put my work, right? That's what I consistently tend to do. I just back it up myself whenever I want to, okay, make a copy of it somewhere else, and away I go. Solution name, I don't have to change it, but I sometimes add the word solution. Okay. That helps a little bit, especially if you are actually, I'm just going to do this as 2-tier basically, but you know, in a 3-tier, because you'll have multiple projects inside the same solution by the time you're done. Default values here are fine. You know, again, this just depends on what SDKs you have on your computer, right? It'll always, if you go to another computer that has a newer SDK or it's missing one, okay, then it will either offer to install it for you, tell you to go install it, or just update the project if it's a newer one available anyway. And we go for coffee and come back? No. Oh, that was pretty quick. It's up on my screen. Now I have to sign in here, which means I'm going to have to get a text. Sorry. Let me just pause. All right. So after the hassle of signing in, we're up and running. So here we are, my Sport Demo Universal Windows application. So the first thing I thought I would do is we'll get that connection string in place. So here is our app object. Now, by the way, in the XAML of the app, this is where you'll often put things, as I mentioned, like styles and so on that you're going to apply to the look of the user interface. But in the code behind, here is where the app object itself is. And you know, let's just have a quick look here. We have an unlaunched event. We have things like navigation failed, on suspending. So you know, you might end up adding some code here and there to respond to these different events, and you can add others in addition, right? But I'm just going to come right in here inside the actual partial class, okay? And I'm going to add the code I need with some comments for my connection string, right? Do it the same way we talked about in our PowerPoint. So /SQL Express, I don't have to worry about the name of the computer, okay? This as well is an advantage because if I go from one computer in the lab to a different one, I don't have to worry about changing the string just for the computer ID, right? So it's username _ sport motors, integrated security is true, that's good, that's all what I want, excellent. So I have that in my app object, so It's in one place in the whole system. I can just call for it from here. All right. Okay, good. So I can close that as well. Don't need the overview. Now, typically, I like to keep things organized as much as possible. In my copy-paste file, I just noticed I mentioned a whole bunch of different folders. Usually, I end up adding all those folders, but really all I need right now, I'm going to have two. Okay? I like to keep the actual models, the entity models that correspond to the actual database design, separated from the other classes in the system. So I'm going to add a folder here for models. And I'm going to also add one where I'm going to put my repositories and all that. I'm just going to call it data. Okay. Now I mentioned, like, eventually you might add one for converters, because sometimes when objects have a given data type but it's different from what it has to be used on the screen, you need to provide a converter to go back and forth automatically for binding a property of an object to an element on the screen, but we'll get more to that in a further example. So for now, that's all I need. I'm just going to right click and add my classes. So these are the ones that correspond to the actual entities I'm dealing with in the database. Again, I'm just going to use sport state. I think I did a copy instead of a paste. There's my sport state entity. Now, I'll right away just make these public. And if I go back, did I close it? I meant to leave it open. Okay. The two fields in state abbreviation or sport state are both strings, right? That's I think an varchar 2 and an varchar 100, something like that. So I'll just use string as the appropriate data type here in C#. Okay? And again, just a POCO, nothing in the setters, plain old CLR objects, and away I go. I'll add the other one. I showed you that trick the other day where you can do a select in SQL, copy and paste. Yeah, I'm not going to bother because I've shown you that before. I'm just going to do my sport customer. And this time, I'll save us all a bit of effort watching me type on the screen, and I'll just copy out of my paste file. Right? Now, you might say, why long? Well, if I hover over, you see that it's technically int64. Right? I think when I did this demo last time, I was showing that long was the same thing, and so that's why I left it that way in my code. So, you know, if you want to change it to int64, that's perfectly fine too. Our normal int is int 32, right? Goes up to a certain value. If you just have an int in SQL Server, then an int here is fine. If you have a big int in SQL Server, that's why I need long, because in SQL Server it's actually a big int is the data type for the customer ID, right? Okay. All right, then we have all the names. So these are all just strings. The only thing that's different here is our discount. We're going to use a double as a data type here, right? And that should be fine. Username and password are both going to be just strings. So I have my two model classes all ready to go to correspond to the database, relational database tables. Okay, just clean up the screen a little bit. Then I'm going to start working in the data folder. So here's where the Wizard of Oz's magic curtain will be. Behind it, the repository is all the smarts for dealing with the database. I'm just going to expose simple methods, right? So it's going to be a pretty simple method. This demo, I'm just going to go get the data and show it on the screen, right? We'll do more advanced demos soon, but that's all we're going to do for that. So it's going to be a simple, I'll start off with a class. You've talked about interfaces, right? Okay. Always a good programming practice to program against an interface, because that way you have a more consistent, reliable design. So I'm going to create an interface here. I'm going to call it my customer repository. Okay, the only change I'm going to make here is I'm going to make this public. And it's going to have one and only task. As I said, this is a very, very simple application. We're just going to go get the data. So I'm going to define here a task in the interface. It's going to return a collection of sport customer objects, Now notice, look at it automatically added the using for my models namespace. You guys don't know how lucky you have it. Even a few years ago, Visual Studio didn't do that kind of thing. We had to manually, well, it would underline and you could right click and tell it to add it. But now it just says, hey, I know you need this, so I'm going to give it to you, right? It's like a helpful mom, you know, packing your lunch before you go off to school, giving everything it knows you're going to need, right? So we'll just call it get customers, okay? And how it does it, okay, we won't have to worry about. We'll just call our repository and get customers and away we go. But we need to implement this interface now, right? So I'll just right click, I'll add a class at this time. Okay, it will just be without the letter I, of course, customer repository. Okay, again, public. And I wanted to implement I customer repository. And there it's underlining, so I can say, yes, help me implement the interface. Well, that was a big help. Well, it was a little wee bit of help, maybe, okay. Yeah, we want to return that, but here is where I can be more specific. You know what? I just don't want this task to just go ahead and do it synchronously. I'm going to make it an async. I can't do that in the interface, but here when I implement it, I can say this is going to be done asynchronously, okay? And it'll be public. Now, of course, throwing in not implemented exception, that makes sense, because hey, it's only so smart, it doesn't know how to actually do that. Not yet. Soon. All right, so how am I going to actually implement this? Well, first of all, I have to get the connection string in here somewhere. So this isn't a true dependency injection system, but I am going to provide it, okay? It's kind of like I'm going to inject it into the class whenever I instantiate a repository class. So I'm going to need a couple things. I'm going to need a private string to hold the connection string, and then I'll add a constructor for the class where I provide it as a parameter here. So it'll be a string, the connection string, okay, and then I'll store it in my local private variable here, and I've got something going on. I have too many curly braces or not enough, one or the other. Okay. Let me just fix it. Okay. Sorry. This is for the actual repository, not for the get customers method. So I was just in the wrong spot when I pasted there, right? So it's in the customer repository. Here's the constructor for it. I pass in the connection string, and away we go. Okay. Now we'll get into the nitty-gritty of our get customers task, right? It'll be an asynchronous task. Now, one of the things we're going to need then is we need an actual connection to the database, okay? So I'm going to use usings, right? That just allows, what does the using do? Very quickly and efficiently frees up the resources as soon as I'm finished using it, right? It used to be more important than it is, but it's still a good programming practice. Actually, C# will often, you know, get away from having to use the curly braces. You can just say using and it'll actually take care of releasing it right away. But I'm still following the old approach that I'm used to doing, so there's nothing wrong with this. It's equivalent. So I'm going to use an SQL connection object, okay? I'm newing it up, and I'm passing the connection string, right? Okay, and that's what it expects. A SQL connection looks for, okay, the connection string. So I have it. I've got it here, my private underscore connection string, so I'm passing it that way as I create the connection object. All right. Now, I'm going to get something ready, because eventually what I want to return is that collection of support customer objects. So I'm going to create an object as a new list of support customer. A list, of course, is an IEnumerable, right? So that is perfectly compatible. So I'm just getting it ready. So I have my grocery bag ready to fill it with groceries and then send it back. Okay, that's my customers here. All right. Next thing to do is actually open the connection to the database. So that's what I'll do. I'll wait, okay, because I'm doing everything asynchronously. So it'll be open async, So we'll go and open an asynchronous connection to my SQL connection itself, to the database, right? Okay. Now, good practice would be to make sure that it's open before I go on. So that'll be the next thing I'll do. I'll use an if, right? If the DB state is connection state.open, then I know I'm good. Yay, I succeeded. I've got the database, right? Okay, well in that case, I need something else. Now I'm doing this without Dapper, right? We're going to come back and see how much cleaner and simpler the code is using Dapper. But this is the old-fashioned approach, okay? Just doing it all manually ourselves. So I'm going to have another using. Okay, so I have a connection, right? Oh. But I'm going to need an SQL command object. So I can execute a command. Now I have a connection to the database. So I'm going to add another using for my command object, right? I will define the command text of my object. Will be the next thing here. Select star from support customer. There it is. Good old hard-coded SQL command as a text string, basically. All right, so that's going to be my command text, so to speak. Then, I'm not done. I need yet another object, right? I need a data reader. So when I execute the command, the data reader will look after reading the data that gets returned. So I basically new up data reader by executing the command execute reader asynchronously. It has to have the command text first, then I can execute it. All right, so I have it. So what do I do with it? Well, while there's still data to read, I will loop through and keep on reading data. So the while loop works very well in a situation like this. Okay. Again, I need the await because it's all asynchronous. So reader, read async. So while there's still data to read, I'll just keep looping through, getting basically one record at a time and reading it in. So for each record, I'm going to new up a new customer, right? Okay. New up a support customer object. And then once I have it, I can, okay, customer dot customer ID. See, IntelliSense is helping me. Well, how do I get that from my reader? Okay. Well, I get it from reader dot. I have to specify the data type. So I'm going to get an int 64. And I can actually use the names, but I can also just, it's going to come in the order of the columns in the database. So the first one is position 0, right? So that will get my customer ID. It's a little dangerous because what if they change the design? So I could use the names instead, just putting them in quotes, but I'm just going to show you this kind of very standard approach that's often done as well. Okay? So the first name and last name are going to look very much the same. I get strings, okay? And it's ordinal position 1 and 2, okay, coming from the reader. All right, now the next one I'm going to grab is the middle initial. Now the middle initial is nullable. So I have to do a bit of extra work. I'm going to show you in my code here 2 approaches. The more succinct approach I'm going to do here with the middle initial is basically just use our unary operator here, my question mark, right? So if I go to my reader and is DB null, okay, the third, which is actually the fourth, index 3 is the fourth piece of information that the reader's providing, right? If it's null, okay, if it's not null, then I'll go and I'll get string. Otherwise, I'll just return an empty string. So that's one way to handle that situation, right? Okay. I'm going to go right down to the end now with my copy paste. And basically, it's all the same approach here for the city, state abbreviation, okay? Again, null. Now the phone number is nullable too, so just to show you a slightly different approach, I can just check first if it's null, okay? And then just use an if else. Same thing. Obviously, it's more succinct to use this kind of an operator as well. Okay. We're getting double here for the discount, right? and then string and string. Finally, at the end of our while loop, we've created this customer object. We populated with all the properties coming from our data reader, all the data values. So we add it to the customer collection, okay, that we're building up, right? And so finally, down here, I'm finished adding all the customers, so I can return customers, and that will satisfy the actual method itself, right? So when I call my getCustomers method, it will return my customers collection I built up by using the connection, by using the SQL reader, the data reader, etc., right? And getting all the data, and away we go. I'll just do a build, make sure. Okay, build succeeded, good, all right. It just lets me know, again, I'm not missing a curly brace somewhere that I can't see on the screen. Okay, so that's all the magic happening behind the curtain of my repository. So that's good. I'll just save oh, no, don't want to do that. Okay, so let's go to the actual front end now. I'm just going to use the main page here, right? So if I bring up the main page, by the way, I've mentioned this before, I find the design surface virtually useless. So I usually do this. I switch sides of the codes here because I can only collapse the right-hand half, so then I'm working in the actual XAML of the page itself. All right, now we're going to need a namespace for our model, our actual classes themselves. So I can add that in here. I can just come in, put an XML namespace. Okay, I'm going to call it data, right? And it will be equal to using, and I should be able to find it here, sport demo models. Okay, so now I have a reference to my models namespace. All right, and something else I'm going to do, I could do this other ways, but since I'm here, I can actually add an event to the page too, right? I can define the loaded event, okay, as a new event handler. It'll just be page loaded. So if I peek in the code behind now, I can see that that added the page loaded event here. That's one of the many ways to get that in place. All right. Now, what kind of a object is the page object itself? It's a content object, right? In other words, it only holds one element, okay? But it's basically a root element, you might say. I can put as many elements inside the grid as I want. I can have stack panels and lists and all kinds of stuff, but the page itself only gets one, right? I can leave it as the grid. I'll often use a scroll panel, right? Because it gives you guaranteed the ability to scroll up and down if it doesn't fit. You know, you turn a device sideways and things don't fit anymore. But the grid is going to be fine for me today. So what am I going to put inside my grid? Well, I could use a couple of different things, list views, grid views, and others that are designed to show data. In a case like this, would definitely go with the grid view. The main difference is the list view is only vertical, right? The grid view will go across the screen, and then if it runs out of room, start a new row, right? So it's clearly much more responsive. Try as much as possible to always be responsive in how you design your UWP applications, right? Yeah, I know we started off showing you stick this here and stick that there and use a design surface and move them around, and you see how it writes the code for you as absolute positioning. Absolute positioning is okay to a limited degree, but you know, then you run it and you can't see everything. You have to maximize it to see everything, and even then sometimes on a small screen it doesn't work. Responsive design is so much more. It's worth the effort, right? So the grid view is really good for that. I'm just going to put my grid view in and we'll talk about the code. Right? Okay. So I'm just giving a name, customer list. You know how margins work. Is item click enabled? I'm going to have it as false. I don't want to be able to click on one of these items and expect it to do anything. So for now, that's some kind of thing we'd change later on if we wanted to bring up, say, a details view, right? We just pick one item and go see the details of it, things like that. Now the grid view requires an item template because it's going to repeat this template for every item that we provide, right? And here, I don't know if you've used item templates before, but the key thing then is inside that we're going to use a data template. So to bind properties in XAML here to data that we're getting from our repository, the key is to use a data template. So here our data type is our sport customer model, right? It's coming to the data namespace, which is basically my models folder, okay? So the sport customer is the object. So every data template here will relate to one customer. Then I can come in, I'm just going to use a stack panel to arrange three things one on top of the other. This is a very minimal, it's only to demonstrate getting data to the screen, right? This is not a professional looking UI by any stretch. So I don't even have labels here, right? I just have text block where the text is going to be bound to, okay, coming from my sport customer, my class, the customer last name, customer first name, and the state abbreviation, right? Those are three pieces of information I'm going to show in separate text blocks. But it's going to be ugly as anything. It's just to prove the fact that we actually did succeed in getting data from the database and showing it on the screen. And that's going to be my very simple grid view I'm going to show in here. One more thing I'm going to add. Notice I didn't even specify what row and column of the grid will my grid view be in, by the way. I haven't specified it in code. So by default it goes where? Row, column, 0, 0, right? Goes to the upper left corner. But really, my grid only has one cell. So that's the cell that's going in, right? No big deal. Okay. Just I'd mention because I'm about to add one more element, and the fact that it's going to be in the same cell doesn't matter at this stage. Later on, we would care about it more, and we might do something else, but at this point, it's okay. So I'm going to just throw in, because whenever we have to wait with an asynchronous operation, I like to put something like a progress ring, you know, little 3 dots or whatever circling around, just to show that, don't worry, something is happening, right? Now again, if I just use synchronous operations, my dots would just sit there and they wouldn't move, right? It would look like the system had walked up. But because I'm using asynchronous, it will be allowed to keep on spinning and spinning, okay, as long as we're just waiting. I can just turn it on and off when I want to in code. So that's it, a very simple interface, just a grid view with 3 pieces of information, not even clearly labeled, just coming from the database, one for every record that we retrieve, and then my progress ring. So that's good so far. Now, coming to the code behind page. Here's where our last bit of work is going to come into play, right? I know I'm going to need that magic curtain, my repository, right? So I'm going to create a customer repository here inside the page class. I'll just use the interface to define it, which works perfectly fine. And then in the constructor for main page, which was already there, I will actually new up my customer repository, okay? And I can get from the app object that connection string, right? There we go. So there's my connection string. So that'll give me my actual customer repository. So when I create the page, the constructor for the page will look after creating my repository, and I'm ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to do it all right in the page loaded event. Okay, I'm not going to wait for anything else. I created the event, so as soon as I load the page, it'll look after going and getting the data and showing it. Bada bing, bada boom. Very, very simple demo of just getting data and showing it on the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do inside this page loaded event, don't forget, make it async. Now it's going to complain because there's nothing asking for, no await operator saying we have to wait for something. But that'll go away once I start adding an await operator somewhere, right? First thing I'll do is I'll show that there's something happening. So I'll set my progress ring to active, or active to true, right? Okay. Now we're going to go to the man behind the curtain and ask him to do something. What did we say we should always wrap any database operations in? When we had our discussion a few minutes ago, we said always put them inside a try catch. Exactly. Try, tab. There's my snippet, try catch. Okay. So I'm going to try, basically, in one line of code, because that's the beauty of a repository, create an IEnumerable collection of support customer objects called customers. And how do I get it? I just await my repository to execute the get customers method. Beauty of a repository, right? I don't have to care how it does it, what database, what even kind of database it's talking to, or maybe it's pulling it out of some other sources, not even a database, right? Maybe it's getting it from a web API through a RESTful API that's up there somewhere. Who cares, right? My repository will get me my data. Last thing to do then, because I have such a simple interface, is go to that customer list. That's the name I gave my grid view. Set the item source to my customers. And that's it. Okay? As long as there's no errors, this should actually work. But guess what? I will definitely get at least one error here. So I'm going to put some stuff inside here. Because I want to handle, I kind of went overboard here, but you know, that's okay. It's better to be thorough than not. So I've got a whole bunch of different exceptions I'm going to check for here. So in my code, I'm going to do a whole bunch of stuff here. Again, this is above and beyond what I would expect you to do until you actually have my code to steal from, to learn from. Okay? I'll just prepare the error message. Now I can go to the exception object, get base exception. That's a great thing because sometimes exceptions have inner exceptions. So if you just go to the exception object, you won't necessarily get the message you're after. Get base exception goes through and finds it wherever it is, right? So that'll get me my message, right? So then I can start checking for different things that I can anticipate, okay? If it contains failed to generate an SSPI context, well, I know exactly what would cause that. In fact, we're going to get that message, okay? So let's skip over that one for now. If it mentions the word server, okay, then I know that it's saying, hey, I can't connect to the database server. I'm suggesting check your connection string, right? If it mentions the word database somewhere in there, I'm going to suggest it probably is you can't connect to the server. Did you create the database? Ah, darn, I forgot to run that damn create database SQL command. Okay? All right. Could not complete operation. Okay? Well, then I'll actually show you the error message coming from the database, right? If it's just something else, okay? But these are the ones that are commonly, I know from experience, are going to come up. So away we go. All right. So with a try catch, optionally, there's a finally. Good spot to put something that I want to finally have happen, whether we have an error or not. So I'll stop my progress ring. And it will make it invisible as well. I don't have to worry about hiding it. If it's not active, I don't see it. Okay? That takes care of the whole thing. All right. Are we ready to try it? Let's do a build. I don't know why it always wants to default to Tizen. Build succeeded. Yay! I know I created the database, so I shouldn't get that error. Oh, darn, it opened on the other screen here. And because there's an error, I can't move it. So maybe if I do this, oh, I should have just restarted. Oh, well. Darn, it's back over here. You're going to have to cheat again. Show you the error. Here's the error that came up. Could not complete operation. Login failed. The login is from an untrusted domain and cannot be used with integrated authentication. Okay. Oh, I'm clicking on it. All right. That's not the exact message I expected, but basically it's the same thing. What did I mention earlier we have to make sure we do? If I come into the app manifest here, here's where all our different options are, capabilities. This was right in the PowerPoint as well. Enterprise authentication. Okay. I have to check that off so that this app can rely on the same login that I've used to get into the system as it goes and connects to the server. So it's just like you checking off that checkbox when you go and log into SQL Server. So I'll just save that. We'll run it again. And this time it's up. Oh, sorry, I had to move it. Did you see the 3 dots? They were spinning. They really were. And there we go. And so there I have all of my data. And because it's in the grid view, it's nice and responsive, right? I can spread it across the screen, down, whatever, right? Yay! So we finally succeeded. We actually got data from our database up onto our UWP application. Oh, patting myself on the back. All right, we're almost done, folks, almost done. What I want to do next, though, is let's go back behind the curtain. If we come to our customer repository, that was an awful lot of code we wrote here, right? A lot of manual work here, creating all this commands and readers and everything else, and then doing all this assignment over. Wouldn't it be great if there was a helper that could do all this object relational mapping for me? Of course there is. So we're going to play around with Dapper. So I come down to the NuGet Package Manager. I can just go to the console. And right here, okay, I can just do an install package. You've used the NuGet Package Manager before, I understand, right? Do you know how IntelliSense works in here? It's just command completion. It's pretty limited, but if I start typing, yeah, then I hit tab, okay? Then it comes up. Now if I go for, well, okay, install package, that's the one I want. So it was already there. But you know, the more letters you have, usually the shorter list of options come up. Install package, Dapper. That's all I need. It just get me the latest version. If I knew I wanted a specific older version for some reason, I could specify it, right? But that's good enough. So that will install Dapper for me. Bada bing. And there it is done. Okay, it took 1.72 seconds. Not too long. All right, good. So now we have Dapper. So I want to use it, so I'll come up here, I'll add the using. And Dapper. There we go. So what does that do for us because we're using Dapper? Well, I still need the connection string, so I'll leave that alone in the constructor for sure. I'm still going to have my get customers, right? I still need the connection object, right? I need to have my SQL connection object. But basically everything inside here down to here can go. For the most part, okay? All right, so using my same connection object, which I'll open. I do still need the SQL, right? Sorry, because I don't have a stored procedure here. Select star from support customer, okay? I'll need that. And I do need to open the connection. So I kind of lied. There's a little bit of work to be done. So I'll do it asynchronously, of course. db.openAsync. All right. Now this next line of code is what replaces almost all that other work. That's it. Okay. My IEnumerable of support customer, I'll just call await. My DB connection query async support customer. And Dapper takes over and does all that work of assigning first name and last name. Oh, what if it's null? Then supply this, etc. All those smarts are built into Dapper, and it is, believe it or not, you could not, no matter what tool you use to measure performance, you could not see hardly any performance hit by switching to using Dapper from doing it by manually. Usually the most manual methods are the most efficient, right? But there's almost no performance hit switching to Dapper. So the last thing we have to do, still, this line was there before, return customers. So isn't that a lot easier to write this kind of code? Obviously it is. Let's just run it and make sure it works. There's our, you saw the dot spinning, there we go. And there's all our code, exactly the same, but using Dapper, it's far easier to write code, okay, than the old-fashioned approach. So that's the end of our demo. Any questions? Okay. All right, well, our next demo, we'll get into a more extensive application. We'll do it as a 3-tier, and we'll actually use stored procedures for all the database operations and so on. But I wanted to get just a quick one showing you, the basics of what's involved, get the concepts in place, and then also show you off how great Dapper is. Bada bing.